These are the techniques needed for a black belt in Krav Maga, apparently. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. The subject for this review is Black Belt Krav Maga, published in 2009 and written by Darren Levine and Ryan Hoover. As far as the authors go, Darren Levine is the head of Krav Maga worldwide. He's also worked as a prosecutor for the County of Los Angeles. Ryan Hoover has spent time in Krav Maga, especially this organization. He has since split away. He teaches a version of Krav Maga that incorporates more grappling into it. Now, the intro of this book includes the training principles of Krav Maga. It includes the rules of self-defense, which is in a question and answer format. And it also includes a number of drills. Now, for the self-defense section, they cover what is and is not considered reasonable force and what is and is not considered a reasonable person, which is valuable for understanding whether or not certain techniques would be appropriate for the situation that you're encountering. The section on drills is one that I like a lot. It's basic format. It doesn't have any photographs or illustrations, but what it does include is the name of the drill, how many people are needed for the drill, the skills that are needed, for instance, punching or knees, the type of equipment one will require, then it gives an extensive explanation of the drill, and finally offers some variations for most of them, as well as some safety considerations for some of them as well. Again, I'm a big fan of this section, even if you don't have a Krav Maga background. I think you can take some of these drills and use them for your own training for self-defense. The first technique section talks about handgun threat defense. I like how they phrase that because I've had a different instructor point out that we're not teaching gun defense, we're teaching gun threat defense, because a threat is someone pointing a gun at you, whereas gun defense would have them shooting at you already, which you're probably not prepared for. Now, before they get into the nuts and bolts of it, they go over some principles like getting offline, controlling the weapon. They mention the difference between controlling an autoloader that has a slide versus controlling a revolver that has a cylinder. Now, most of these techniques are divided up into threats from the front and threats from the side or rear. These include a number of scenarios, including kneeling, having an object between you, and actually being on the ground. The next chapter is on carjacking. This one also deals with handgun threats. It will differentiate between threats from outside the car, in other words, someone approaching the driver's side window, and threats from inside the car, in other words, someone in the passenger or rear seat. Next chapter is handgun threats and third parties. So these would be scenarios where someone is threatening a third party, somebody else with a handgun, and you decide to intervene in order to save that person. Once again, this is divided between threats to the front and threats to the side or rear. And the final empty hand section is knife threats. And this chapter begins with a series of principles that one needs to pay attention to. This includes things like redirecting and controlling the attack. It also has a sidebar on how to use everyday objects as a distraction. And as with the section on handguns, includes defenses against threats from the front as well as the rear. And also this varies the range a little bit, which is something of note here. So in other words, a threat from very close range to a threat that's farther away. Now, in about the second half of the book, we get into the defender being armed and using that to counter what the opponent has. The first chapter is on baton versus knife. So this is the defender has an impact weapon like a stick or perhaps an umbrella or something to that effect, and they are defending against an attacker who has a knife. Also, again, there's a little sidebar here on common everyday objects that can be used as a shield, because you don't always have your nice little nightstick impact weapon. Sometimes you just need, for instance, a chair in order to create something between you and your opponent to act as an obstacle. The following chapter is blunt weapons versus other blunt weapons, and again, this is single stick versus single stick. This chapter divides it into whether you have a single-hand grip or a two-hand grip, and their version of the two-hand grip is gripping the object at either end. I should say a lot of these defenses result in doubling up, sort of using the stick as a baseball bat once you've gotten your initial defense out of the way. There's also a section on edged weapons versus other edged weapons, so knife versus knife, basically. This one has a sidebar on important points. For instance, trying to move to your opponent's dead side, or the side that doesn't have the blade on it. Everything that they demo here seems to be using larger knives, so things roughly the size of a kitchen knife. And one criticism I have on this section, there seems to be a lot of overkill. For instance, here we have someone maneuvering their way behind someone and then grabbing them and stabbing them in the back, and I don't think that that's really in the purview of self-defense. And finally, we get into a section that most people in the United States and in most of the Western world aren't going to encounter in civilian life, and that is defense against hand grenades, which is interesting, but it is included here. And one thing to note in this section, they all pretty much end the same. Like, once you've taken the grenade away and then you've dropped the person to the ground with your technique, it says that you need to put the grenade under their body, run far away from them, and then lie down with your feet toward them, your legs crossed, and you're covering your head. I think that's good information to have. I don't know how many people would actually need it. And finally, the book ends with an index. Again, the purpose of this book was meant to sort of show the black belt level techniques from Krav Maga worldwide. For those of you who've seen my previous review on complete Krav Maga, that went through the colored belt system, so I think these are meant to be used sort of in concert with one another. As far as the pros go, I really enjoyed the section on drills, as I mentioned up front. I think that, again, even if you don't practice Krav Maga proper, you can take some of these drills and use them with a partner or with a small group of people for your own self-defense purposes. I think a lot of the principles that they listed here are very good. And again, even if you don't practice Krav Maga, they can apply very well to self-defense situations. And I also have to say that the variety of scenarios is a positive. Whether you are armed or unarmed, you're facing someone with impact weapons, you're facing someone with explosives. It covers a lot of ground in this book. As far as the cons go, I mentioned some of the overkill stuff, and I think there are some dubious situations that are shown. For instance, in the gun threat defense, there's one where you're flat on your stomach, the person has straddled your lower back, and they're holding a gun to the back of your head. Now, one of the co-authors, Ryan Hoover, has actually mentioned in interviews it's better to train to not find yourself in that position, because in order to find yourself in that position, so many things would have had to have gone wrong. So that's just one example of some of the more dubious self-defense scenarios. And of course, there's the overkill from the knife section where you move behind the guy and you stab him a bunch of times in the back. And I think, considering one of the authors was a prosecutor for Los Angeles County, dude, like, I don't think that would hold up in court. You know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a prosecutor, but you're claiming self-defense and the other guy has a bunch of stab wounds in his back. That seems like a tough sell. I also think that there's an over-reliance on kick him in the groin. You know, once you have control of a weapon, kick him in the groin. That is a very pain-reliant technique. I think there may be other tools that would have a better effect. For instance, you know, stomping to the side of the knee or something in order to buckle the opponent. Elbows, knees, headbutts, things like that. I would refer you guys to an article by Dr. John Titchen, who has run several scenario training sessions, multiple ones every year, and he has an article talking about the groin as a target, and based on what happens in his scenario goes. Some people will drop like a stone when they're hit. For some people, there's a delayed reaction. Other people don't react to it at all. Again, that's a very pain-reliant technique. Pain is unpredictable and unreliable. So that's another criticism I have of this book. As far as recommendations go, I think there is some novelty in things like the grenade defense. You know, if you absolutely want to be prepared for every scenario, there's a whole chapter on something that most people will not encounter. But again, because it's sort of novel, I think that it might be worth getting for some people. I think if you are part of Krav Maga worldwide and you want to get your black belt, this sounds like it would be the study guide for that, assuming that it hasn't changed too much since 2009. I think in general, for people looking for self-defense, again, there are some good principles here, there's some good drills here. Some of the stuff, as I've mentioned, seems pretty dubious, but there are definitely things that, as someone interested in self-defense, like, I'm taking a look at some of these drills going, oh man, I think I could benefit from that. You know, and again, some of the principles that precede some of the chapters seem like some pretty good ideas. So that's all I have for this week. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have anything to say about it, feel free to leave a comment. I do read all the comments, even though it take a little while to get around to replying to some of them. If you are interested in more book reviews or more of my thoughts on martial arts, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you would like to help out the channel or sponsor a book review or some other video, please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. I'm going to put a link to that in the description. And thank you for following along with me, and I'll see you guys later.